welcome to Harlow, and we thank everyone in Harlow for the fantastic welcome they've given us this morning. I started the day very well by having a bit of breakfast in Cafe Pizzeria down the road, and it's very good, go there. And we had a very nice chat with Zolga, Lainey and Tom, and they're going to tell us for a few minutes about life in Harlow, issues in Harlow.
Thank you very much. I wasn't expecting this meeting when they asked me to speak, so bear with me. Today I'd like to speak about the difference that PCSOs have made in our community. In the past, engagement with the local community, and this is pre-2006, had been limited, but PCSOs meant we could have a constant communication between us and the police. Issues were sorted quickly before getting out of hand. Their presence in schools and on the estate helped integrate the police with the young people, stopping the you and us culture that we tend to get with the youth. Our PCSOs also help secure funding for an all-weather play area. They, and Nigel Day and John Stratham, work with the community to get a youth shelter erected, and they help with football, fishing projects, fun days, Halloween. You just have to ask them and they will be there to support you, even on their days off sometimes. All this helped stop youngsters taking the wrong turn. And between 2007 and 2012, when we had the most PCSOs, the number of nuisance use incidents in Bearcroft fell from 36 to 4. An endorsement to our working together with the PCSOs. In its heydays, we had 35 PCSOs in Harlow. Then in 2012, because of the cuts, those numbers began to fall, pushing the police into working in a reactive way, with very little time for the community, slowly leaving us back to where we was pre-PCSO days. Within 6 months of our last PCO leaving, fly tipping was back on a regular basis. In our past, the PCSOs were able to deal with this quite quickly with our help and such issues such as local intelligence and ties to the community. Now the response is not so effective. In May, Harlow we're down to 5 PCSOs from a peak of 35. This has left Harlow people mainly in the dark regarding police activities. We have a local Bobby, but his patch is big and not seen nearly as much.
I'm going to talk about my own personal experiences. My name is Tom Farr, and I lived in Harlow forever. And in 2012, I was diagnosed with cancer. So I went through the full remit of things. I had chemotherapy at Harlow Hospital, Princess Alexandra Hospital. I had radiotherapy at North Middlesex Hospital, and also went to the UCH. And this went on for several years. During that process, what I tried to do is talk to the staff while I was going for treatment, while I was actually having scans and things. And one of the things that came over to me was how disillusioned they were. They all felt that so much was going on, they just couldn't manage what was going on in a sense. And also the fact that they felt they were underfunded and undervalued. And you can actually put that in terms of education as well. I think there's a general feeling education has risen help, that sort of feeling that they're bewildered by what's happening and they feel they're undervalued. I am aware from talking to staff, they're very concerned the shortage of nurses in Harlow Hospital, Princess Alexandra Hospital. They have to rely on agency nurses. Agency nurses roughly cost about twice as much as a normal nurse when you put all the costs on. And they feel that not only is that expensive, but it undermines patients' care. But I don't think that agency nurses have got that insight and that sort of continuity that providing like an ordinary nurse would provide. I'm also aware that PAH has got financial problems due to shortage of funding. I think this year they'll be looking for an extra £45 million to get them through the year. I'm advised that's true. And I also know that for next year they're going to be really struggling financially. Talking about what they're doing. Yeah, in the Independent yesterday, in the Eye, it said, the National Health Service has almost 70,000 fewer staff working in hospitals and GP surgeries across the country than the government previously thought. The government didn't know. A head count taken in December said there was 70,000 less than the government said there were. And the government said, oh, yes, well, we weren't aware of that. Now, that means, in fact, there are actually 15,000 fewer nurses and 33,000 fewer doctors. And the government said, oh yes, they're there, but they're not there because there are 70,000 people less working in the health service. And that's a reflection, I think, on how much this government is aware of what's going on and how much it cares about what's going on. So I would urge everybody in this room today to make that a priority at this coming election. Local elections and national, make that a priority. The National Health Service, as far as I'm concerned, is one of the most important issues we could ever work for. And I think we should all face up to that and be proud. And when we go knocking on doors or talking to people, say we're not happy with the current situation, we want it changed. And I think most people in this country, most people would actually be prepared to pay more tax to achieve that achievement. Thank you.
My name is Lainey Shears and I'm the candidate for this local ward of Mark Hall in Harlow. Harlow was planned and built to forge communities where people could live and work and where the services people needed were within easy reach. But this Tory government is attacking the very fabric of our town, slashing local authority funding and making it harder to provide vital services. The Tories' unfair choices are putting at risk family prosperity and public services that we rely on. Cuts to support for working people will leave over 2 million families £1,600 a year worse off, while those at the very top have been given tax breaks. Under the Tories, we are being threatened with forced academisation of schools with no parent or local authority governors holding them to account. That can't be right. They are presiding over a housing crisis. House building is at its lowest in peacetime since the 1920s. We are facing a tax on social housing through pay to stay and the end of lifetime tenancies, which will affect the communities that we have here in Harlow. In Harlow we have a Labour-controlled council. We are working hard to maintain the services we need. We have seen the first council homes built here in 30 years. Labour will support working people by investing in new affordable homes and for rent and buy. And Labour will stand up for British families and businesses by creating an economy that delivers prosperity and security for all, not for just those at the top. We must maintain a Labour majority in Harlow to ensure the future of our town and our services. Only a Labour council will stand up against unfair Tory cuts. We must work together to secure a Labour majority on the 5th of May. This election is a chance to vote for a Labour Party that will stand up for us all. Today in Harlow, as you know, we are launching our national campaign for the elections in May. And I'd like to invite back to the stage
Big thank you to Tom Zolka and Lainey for what they've just said, outlining their struggle in the community and the vitality of all the services that we all depend on. And I want to say thank you to everyone that's organised this event today here in Harlow and to the Moot House Community Centre for welcoming us here this morning, because it's a lovely venue and it's an example of what a good community can achieve and a good local authority can achieve in providing services for everybody. So thank you very much indeed. Labour is standing up for communities across the country. The elections on the 5th of May give everyone in Britain a vote. In England, Wales and Scotland, the whole of the UK is voting. I'm the first Labour leader for 80 years. I'm not 80 years old, so to have been a local councillor. I'm standing up for my community as a councillor, just as we as MPs have to stand up for the communities we represent. And it's great being here in Harlow launching today's election campaign. This town, this new town, was built by the vision of a post-war Labour government. They had a vision that they delivered on. The vision of the kind of town, community and housing balance they want. And a lot of the legacy of that period is still with us today. The National Health Service, the welfare state, council housing and other new towns like Harlow. And they did all that post-war Labour government, in the aftermath of total war, with a country truly and completely bankrupt. Now this Conservative government, this Tory government tells us it can no longer afford nurses' bursaries, can no longer afford student grants, has no option but to impose the bedroom tax. The Conservative government is systematically making wrong choices and has absolutely the wrong priorities. a very long time. In the last Parliament, they cut £4 billion from adult social care, the budget that looks after the elderly people to remain in their homes. Yet found billions to give huge tax breaks to big corporations and the highest earners. Just last month in the budget, they tried to take away up to £150 per week from people with disabilities to fund tax cuts for the very wealthiest. That's their priorities. This week, the publication of the Panama Papers drives home what more and more people feel. Quite simply it's this: there's one rule for the rich and one rule for everybody else. And it's therefore high time that we got tough on tax havens. Britain has a huge responsibility, but Labour in Westminster has proved you can still have influence and you can still make a difference. It was by speaking out and standing up with people with disabilities that we shamed the government into abandoning their disgraceful cuts to personal independence. But we're not done yet. We'll continue the campaign to stop the cuts to disabled people's ESA that is still there as a proposal in the budget. This week, around 3 million families, including thousands in Harlow, would have lost over £1,000 a year in working tax credits. But by campaigning around the country and by our votes in Parliament, Labour forced the Tories to scrap those cuts. They are not now going ahead. To stop their cuts in universal credits. The cuts being inflicted on working families, disabled people, and the failure to stand up for communities across Britain are a political choice, not an economic necessity. By standing up, we can force this government back. And Labour is standing up. We're defending communities. We're working with people to defend communities. And there's a very big, urgent need for us to do so. The government is damaging the fabric of this country, so our industries and our public services. In opposition, we forced the government to backtrack on cuts to the police budgets. We had to stand up to prevent any more police officers being lost, because there are now, as we pointed out earlier, 18,000 fewer police officers than there were 6 years ago. That's serious. The loss of community policing is serious for any community. There is a housing crisis of supply and affordability. And again, as Lainey pointed out, house building is at its lowest level since the 1920s. And homelessness has risen every year that this government has been in office since 2010. I pay tribute to Harlow Council. It's building council housing for its communities. Well done, Harlow. Well done, those councils that are managing to build. I was in Bristol last week, and many people I spoke to were kind of shocked about what was happening to their city. Marvin Rees, the mayoral candidate for us there, and I met a lot of families who are living in the private rented sector. Their rents have gone up. They can't afford to pay those rents. They are being socially cleansed out of a community they've lived in for many, many years. The same is happening in city after city across Britain, because we have a government that is not interested in regulation, not interested in the consequences of deregulation of the private rented sector. So we have to have a vision on housing, and it's Labour that has that vision on housing. They want to sell off, we want to build. They want to decant, we want to keep communities together. There's a very big difference between those two philosophies. Class sizes are up, the teacher shortage is getting worse, and there is a crisis in many places of school places. Yet the Conservatives want to spend hundreds of millions of pounds on forcing all schools to become academies. That won't benefit a single child or train a single teacher. It won't ease the anguish of parents worried about school places. They're prepared to spend £1 billion on forced academisation of every school. shutting parents out of a say in the running of their schools when even their own Conservative councillors don't want it. Teachers don't want it, parents don't want it, we don't want it. We are going to oppose it all the way. The National Health Service is our proudest creation. Health service free at the point of use as a human right for all. What an incredible achievement of that post-war Labour government. What a statement of our community of saying we will provide health care for all. But it's under threat like it's never been under threat before. The government failing to train enough nurses and now cutting bursaries that could train more. They picked a wholly unnecessary fight with the brilliant junior doctors. They've cut mental health budgets. The NHS has a record deficit and waiting times are rising. Here, the Princess Alexandra Hospital in Harlow is facing a huge deficit due to Conservative failure on the NHS. We stand up for the NHS, the funding for all forms of care in the NHS, including mental health. That is the Labour way of doing things. That's deeply unfair. They failed. They failed on the deficit, failed on debt, failed on investment, failed on productivity, export, growth and earning. Across the country, Labour councils are standing up, like here in Harlow. £1 million has been invested in town centre regeneration. Electing a Labour council is the best protection for your community against the onslaught from this Conservative government. Because even in the toughest times, Labour councils are making better choices to support people. Introducing genuine living wage to tackle low pay. Dozens of Labour councils across the country are boosting wages for thousands of people by insisting that all council contractors pay the real living wage to their staff. Low pay, job insecurity holds people back, meaning too many families are struggling just to make ends meet every month. Here in Harlow, like many other Labour councils, they're building council housing for families that need a home. But all councils must be allowed and encouraged to do so on a much greater scale to deal with the housing crisis. What's the Tory response? What is the Tory response? To force councils to sell off council housing at a time when it's never been more precious or vital, and when our Labour MP, Theresa Pearce, one of our front bench spokespersons on housing, put actually a very simple amendment to the housing bill. All it asked was to ensure that any homes that were on the market for rent must be fit for human habitation. It's not a particularly big ask. Too much for the Tories. They voted it down. How disgraceful is that? Labour in Harlow has invested as well. Bring street lighting back, turning it on overnight. The Tories in Essex apparently think Harlow should be kept in the dark. We don't. Labour brings light to Harlow. Standing up for communities. Every vote for Labour on May the 5th is a vote for a better way. It's a vote for dignity for people with disabilities. It's a vote against rising child poverty. It's a vote to protect the vital industries we've got in this country. It's a vote to stand against the super rich who are dodging their taxes, as the Panama revelations have shown. Is a vote for a party that believes the economy should work for everyone in every part of the country. Every vote for Labour this May is a vote to say it doesn't have to be like this. There is a better way. Labour is standing up to take that very positive message onto every doorstep across the whole country. Let May the 5th be the turning point. When Labour grew, Labour got support, and Labour showed there is a different, much better way of running this country for the good of all, not just the benefit of the very few wealthy people that have had it too easy for too long. Thank you very much.
You're off.
Yeah. Make my year.
Sure.
Take my
Your year?
Take my photo.
Come on, it's only April. You don't know what might come yet. Can you? You don't know what might. You don't know what might come yet, do you? It's only April.
Can you smile?
Yeah, very good. And another XR from Islington.
Yeah. Let's go on.
Lovely to see you, darling.
For you.
Come on then, Jeremy. Thanks a lot.
Take care.
Jeremy Conrad, of all the messages that came out today regarding issues, say, surrounding Harlow, which one would you like people in Harlow to think about the most?
Well, there's got to be two, actually. One is the injustice within our society with tax havens, tax dodging and tax evasion in British dependent territories, and the Panama Papers have shown all of that. On the other side of it, the crying need for the development of more council housing and regulation of the private rented sector to ensure balanced communities and decent housing for all. That's the message from Labour, that we'll chase down the tax avoiders and tax evaders in order to fund public services.
Would you really think that people in Harlow are, wandering around today or working hard today are actually thinking about that?
A bit, possibly. It's been so big all over the news. I'm sure it's come across to them that there is one rule for the rich and one for the poor, and or for the rest of us perhaps. And so I think that message is there. Labour is about an expanding economy. It is about dealing with the housing crisis. It is about investment in people, and that's the message I was trying to put across this morning at what was a very big and very enthusiastic meeting.
The first speaker spoke about PCOs and crime, etc. Both
Indeed
in
he did.
Thurrock and in Harlow. The eviscerating of police numbers has really had an effect. Does that concern you?
Yeah, there's 18,000 police officers less than there were 6 years ago, but often the big reductions taken place in local policing and in PCSOs are actually very important to build that link between the police and the community. The way you reduce crime is actually by designing it out, by building it out, by lighting it out, but above all by having an interactive police force, policing by community consent. If you take away the local policing role and you solely have a blue light police service rushing in whenever there's a disaster, the levels of cooperation by the public are often less. The crime rate gets higher.
And finally, I know some councillors who quit this, only having 4 or 5 years to quit because they just felt the local government sort of becoming irrelevant. What's your message to those councillors who decided to quit?
Thanks for what you've done on the council. Sorry you're quitting from it. I understand that frustration. I was a councillor myself, and constantly one feels frustrated at resources and everything else. But we are serious as a party about devolution of power. We're serious about re-empowering local government and making it the centre of innovative development on housing, on social services, on libraries and swimming pools, all those kind of things, as well as, of course, a generator of economic development, which a local authority can be if it's given the powers and the opportunity. That's what I want to see happen.
Mr. Coffin, thank you.